So welcome once again. My name is Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation, Real People, Real Conversations, and Real Success. And so the question that I have for you today, are you really settling? And that oftentimes is something that I think a lot of people do, as much as they don't admit to it or as much as they don't share it with others. And so then the question is this, is that, what is actually possible for you in your life? Is there more possible for you in your life? And how is it that you're going to be able to get that? And so I'm delighted today to be talking to an incredible individual who really is an expert at personal development, consistent training, and reaching beyond the limits that most people have accepted for themselves. And so I'm excited to be introducing Gary Allen Rush. He's a business coach as well as a neurostrategist. Gary, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm going to admit to our listeners right away that we have a few technical difficulties. So I am going to keep on muting Gary when I'm talking. And hopefully there won't be any dissonance in our discourse but the thing is that I already mentioned to Gary that I'm going to let him do most of the talking because what he has to share is pretty important. Because once again, as I mentioned in the introduction, one of the challenges that so many people have, they just settle with what the supposed norm is. Who decided on that norm? And the truth is that life is so much grander and available to you as long as you choose to go for that. And that's exactly what Gary has done. Most importantly, he has also participated in one of the most grueling challenges that anybody could endure, and typically endured by men and women 30 or 40 years younger than he is now. So Gary, welcome.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So share with us your thoughts on not settling and how is it that people can get so much more out of life?
Yes. What I would say, and I've worked with a lot of people, and what I would say is that most of us, we tend to settle for comfort and certainty, and our life is on autopilot, and we go through life and we go to work and we come home, and a lot of people then will watch TV or do what they do, and they're not conscious of their life, and I think we're just naturally wired to go that way for many, many reasons. And what you'll find is that the people that really do extraordinary things and then have a much more fulfilling life, they have that ability to develop a hunger to want more. And I believe there's secrets to developing that. And I don't think it's unique to any one individual. And I think if you follow those, there's certain keys that if you follow that you can develop that same hunger and have a more fulfilling life and add more value to the people around you if you learn sort of those keys to what you need to do.
But here's the question then that I have for you is why is that people do settle? What is the motivation or reason that people are settling? And in that case, how is it that you feel that people can actually discover that there is a hunger inside of them?
The reason I believe that people settle is, and I know, Bart, you know this strategy, there's a technology that's called spiral dynamics, and it talks about, the 8 levels of thinking, or some people refer to 8 levels of consciousness. And at that first level is survival. And to me, survival equates with that need for certainty. And so I think that's where our nervous system starts, and that part of our nervous system is more evolved. And I think so we naturally, gravitate to certainty. I think it's and one of our mentors, like Robin, say that people avoid pain and go to pleasure, and I think it's just true. And if you reflect back and look at your life, you can see where that shows up. I think people just naturally gravitate that way. So, and then you had, what was your second part to that question?
Well, and then how would you develop that hunger?
Yeah. So what I would say is, I think what people need to do is schedule time, and my recommendation is maybe every quarter, every 3 months, and you go away and you get out of your normal environment, and you get quiet and away. There's different ways to do it. One of the ways is that you could just focus on your breath, and you focus on your breath, and you seed your subconscious with questions that would be like, what is something like I'm really meant to do? What is something maybe that I've ignored because I've been so busy with just doing daily living that I've sort of ignored or forgotten, and ask those questions, and then immediately focus back on your breath. And typically, the longer you do that, whether you do it for a half hour or an hour, and then you pay attention to what those responses are, you start developing insights that start driving you, that you get associated to things that you're meant to do, more so than just making a living. And this is part of it then, and this is something that a lot of people do that are high achievers, is they do seek out other people that are doing extraordinary things, and that also, when you put those two forces together of taking time out and then associating with people that are doing extraordinary things, there starts to become a hunger that starts developing within you.
Yeah, what I think you just shared is really quite profound. And I think one of the key points as well, just to expand on what you just shared, Gary, is simply this, is that, all of us have different destinies, and it's dependent on what it is that you're choosing to do. And some people can just handle a lot more stuff than others. But you do reach a point of distraction where there's too much, you're just in mental overload, or cerebral overload, as I like to put it. And simply then those things that are not happening in your life are distracting you from perhaps the things that are also most important for you in life. And you mentioned earlier in our talk is that one of the challenges that people have is that they simply get distracted from stuff, and they're not listening to that inner voice. And so going deep, as you're suggesting, is listening to that inner voice, listening to that inner child inside of you, and just letting that voice come out and speak and say, hey, you know what? I actually want to go on an adventure to New Zealand, which is what I think you're doing pretty soon.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I know, in working with a lot of people, it's just a belief I have that I think people are made to do much more, and that they're here for much more than just making a living. And so in the work that I do, and in some of the work that you've done, and when you work with people and you get them to do some of these things, they light up. They start connecting to their core reason why they're here, or their core purpose why they're here, and they start connecting to that, and then that starts some momentum. And now there's other things they'll need to do, but that's a great start. And once you connect to that, you're more likely then to take yourself out of the craziness of the day to day and put time aside to do the things that are more meaningful to you than just making that living.
It's interesting putting in a different perspective on it. I mean, you can almost say there's like three phases in our life. Growing up as a child, where anything's possible and you're just in that dreamland where you're having fun, you're doing exactly what you want. Then the middle part, the middle of the story, is where you're doing all these things that you're thinking you're supposed to do, or other people told you to do, all your obligations. But then you reach a point in your life where it's like, it's all about purpose. It's all about, okay, what is it that I really want to do in life? Because you've reached that maturity at that point, saying to yourself, you know what? I'm going to let go of all these other things that I felt I had to do. Now I'm going to focus on me, because I want to be the best version of myself. And you said something really key, and I want to commend you for doing something very unique, very special. I mean, you're one of the very few people that I know that have gone through this Hell Week version called Kokoro, where this is a concept brought together by Mark Devine from The Unbeatable Mind, if anybody wants to check that out. But most importantly, which I found profound from when I was reading his stuff, is that he claims that there's 20 times more inside of you, and you just alluded to that. And so you have done this, and I don't want to, aid you in this interview. It is my understanding that you're also the oldest person that has successfully accomplished this. And I'd like the listeners to hear your story, your motivation, your experience, because what it is that you can do at the age that you're at, much older, say 23, 30 years older than, the younger kids that are failing to do something that you've done at that age.
Yeah, and to me, Kokoro is a great metaphor for what we're talking about. Just a little quick backstory is the when I took this challenge on, it scared me to death, and the reason is there are a number of people that have been through the event that have blogs, and I'd read these blogs of Ironman athletes that were in their 20s and 30s, and they said it was the toughest thing they've ever done. They said it was like doing 2 Ironmans back to back, and that even with these younger guys, usually typically 40% of them would not make it through. Sometimes 45% would not make it through. And so you're reading all these horror stories. And so I'm looking at me, at the time I was 64, and I'm reading these guys that are 20s and 30s that can't make it. And then as I was training for it, I did, I hired a Navy SEAL to help me train. And he said, he says, you won't be able to make it through it, but if you can get through 24, you can make 24 hours, consider it a victory. And at that time, the oldest guy that had ever made it through was like 54. And they've had a lot of people in their 50s attempt it and didn't succeed. So it was a great challenge, and it was both 2 parts. You had to be physically fit. It wasn't just all mental. You had to train yourself and go beyond that. And that in itself was getting through discomfort of training and getting up and running 15 miles a day and then doing CrossFit that night, getting through that discomfort. And then, so you had to be physically at a certain standard, but then it was mental, because the event is designed to physically and emotionally beat you down and make it discomfort. Their whole job is to make you just uncomfortable the whole time you're through the event, because you don't get any sleep. You go 3 straight days without any sleep, and you're constantly moving, going. So.
Well, it's definitely a remarkable achievement by anybody's standard, and I understand too that it's just not physical, as you're mentioning, but it's really all about that mental part and the ability, to dig in deep in your deeper soul and realize, what, there's much more in me right now. And I'd like to share a comment from an amazing leader that we have so much regard for, that has absolutely changed our lives, and just an incredible thought leader in this world, and had a phenomenal interview recently, and very much, honor this man. That's Mark von Muser. So Gary is not just an amazing person, high-level coach. He's a badass, a congruent, committed man pushing the boundaries of what is possible. The oldest graduate for Kokoro, which is a 50 to 60-hour Navy SEAL Hell Week, which is the crucible for men that become Navy SEALs. That's just the tip of the iceberg of who Gary is. And so thank you, Mark, if you're still listening. Really appreciate that feedback. And, again, one of his favorite words, you're spot on.
And that event, though, it speaks to what I'm mentioning, is there were several elements to it, but a big part of it is having a compelling vision. And so one of my frustrations, and one area of people not getting into staying in comfort, is I see so many people. At the time I was living in Colorado, and all my neighbors were in their 40s, and you would speak to them and they go, oh my God, I can't barely walk around the block, and they'd be sore, and they were seduced into thinking that once you're 40, you become, physically incapable of doing things. And so that was a big driver for me, because I knew it wasn't true. And I knew if you had that compelling vision and you had the correct training and commitment to it, that you can do things that people believe that you can't do. And so, and then once I got in the event, it was motivating, because a lot of these younger guys, because half our class didn't make it through, it was motivating though, because the people that are trying to hang in there is they said, I'm not quitting if you don't quit. And so that was another, is I didn't want them to quit. So, but the reason I'm bringing that up is how important having that drive to do something, it allows you to do more. When you have that hunger to do something, it allows you to get through a greater degree of discomfort. And there was a lot of discomfort going through that event.
You made two key comments there, and also want the listeners to remember this, is that, this being human is not an easy thing. I mean, there's so many challenges, there's so many pains. And the two things that will absolutely help you get through anything is, and one thing you mentioned, is having that compelling future. And you and I have also talked about this with Steve Linder from Strategic Brain. And one of the things that I learned from him is that how many people actually have, let me rephrase that. Everybody has a compelling future, but what's interesting is that most people are not even aware of that. And so without that hunger, without that drive, without that desire to succeed, things are simply not going to happen. But the other component that I feel that's very critical, and again, so many people just ignore or neglect or are afraid to tap into, is our community as a support system. And that support system goes both ways. Number one is that, your accountability to that other person to help them show up in the way that they can show up, because you know that they can and you're there for them. And so you're holding people to a higher standard and helping them and giving them that energy. But also in return, you're also getting that support back. And then that, both directions support system is so key for all of us to really achieve what it is that we want to achieve. And that's also one reason I know that you do the work that you do, strategizing with people so that they can find the success they want in life.
So that's a spot on, because what I would say is there's no way I could have made it through that event on my own. And so I trained for 8 months for the event. And along the way, we had a group that I was working with that was training as well. And we would have weekly calls. And we also had a number of experts in different areas about how to deal with temperature extremes, how to train in running so you don't get injured, how do you keep your foundation strong and as you train. We had people that came in and talked about, the right CrossFit training for this particular event. And so without that, there is no way I could have made it through. And then along the way is, because I don't want to pretend that I was so certain I can do it, is I had other people on my team that had done extreme events. And I know, like a month before we were going to do the event, I sprained my ankle, and I was seriously considering not doing it because it was at the peak of the training. You had to sort of peak your training at a certain time, and that right at that peak, I sprained my ankle, and I was really doubting whether I was going to do it. And so one of my team members I spoke with that had been through, and he's put himself through a lot of discomfort, and he talked me through it and allowed me to take the event on, and I'm so glad I did. But that speaks to what you said. You've got to have that support team, and you want to find that support team to maximize what you can give and provide to other people. I love that.
Yeah, our success is not done on our own, and the truth is that, as we get the support from others, we're also involved and participating with the success of others. And so one question that I have for you, Gary, is simply this: what's different for you, after this unbeatable event?
I love that question, because it made me, the event was bittersweet in this way. Is when I went through the event, I fully realized how powerful we can be as human beings. And so it was bitter in that I'm like, well, early in my life, if I had that right support and those right mentors around me, I'm like, wow, my life would have been drastically different, because I think for a lot of my life, I was in comfort and didn't take the opportunities and maximize my resources. But the great part of the event, it made me aware of like what what resources were within me that I wasn't aware of, and it expanded my awareness of what I'm capable of doing, and it's made me, incredibly fulfilled. And so, and then taking that, and it's a lesson now as I move into the future, is I'm more willing to take on that unknown, and more willing to go into the unknown, because it's not a theory. I totally get the benefit of going into discomfort, and then also having a compelling vision, and then having a support team.
So with that in mind, as we slowly wrap up this incredible conversation, and I look forward to having many more with you, by the way, in particular with an upcoming event. And so my question for you and for any of the listeners, we are going on a trip to New Zealand with about 30 different transformational leaders, and really as messengers of our own personal voice, our own personal vision, and see how we can support others in other communities, with their journey in life and maximizing, that 20x factor within them. When we can, just by a change in or shift in perspective or idea or insight, can change somebody's life. That's exactly what the purpose is. And so what's interesting is this is a 2-week excursion to New Zealand with Live Your List Productions and Sprite Lorient Global, two incredible individuals making major changes in life, especially with the water filters that we're bringing to New Zealand. And, one would think that New Zealand is such a developed country, but like most countries, you still have the indigenous tribes. And the Waitaha is a tribe that was only discovered, I believe, in the late 70s or 80s. And it's a tribe that, again, I believe over 30 or 40,000 years old. And just a couple of years ago, they're allowing foreigners or visitors to come see them. And we're very fortunate to be one of the first groups to go see them as well. So this is a very transformative event that's going to come up. And so my question for you, Gary, what are your thoughts of the upcoming trip, and what are maybe some of your specific outcomes or hopes during this trip?
Yeah, it to me, it encapsulates sort of what we're talking about, because there are elements to this trip that definitely put me in discomfort. Is, right now I do not consider myself a public speaker, and so part of this trip we're going to be speaking before a group of like maybe 3,000 to 5,000 people. So, I wouldn't recommend you start your speaking career in that type of venue. Yet, I'm still going to do it. I'd be lying to you to say I know I've got it. It sort of scares me, and it's putting me in discomfort. But I get that the benefit of doing it, and because even now, just preparing for it, it's prepared my mind of making, when you stretch yourself, it opens your mind to new distinctions. And so I've already gotten some new distinctions, and no matter how that talk goes, I've benefited from it. And so it's going to be, and then the other part of it is, it's a great part of the trip is to add some of the content on health that I know, and be able to add that value. And then, like you said, is to provide for these different areas in New Zealand and Vanuatu that don't have drinking water. So I just love the whole concept of the trip. It's your bucket list. It's your serving. It's providing for people that don't have clean water. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Very nice. And what's true too, and we have learned this in all the training that we've done with incredible mentors and leaders like Mark from User. And it's all about modeling. It's all about modeling what other people are doing great. And what I so appreciate, respect from Mark and you and others, and this is our opportunity in New Zealand, as I'm going to be joining you on this trip, is really, shedding the light, if you will, on what's possible in life. It's not from a political or religious perspective, but it's really about choice. I think happier people have more choices in life. And when, as messengers of your perspective, of your insights, can shed light on something that somebody didn't even know about, can totally change your life, that's what that's all about. And so I'm particularly excited, and I'll have to admit myself is that I'm not even worried about the event because I haven't even thought about it. And so I'm totally unprepared, but I did come up with my opening statement this morning, which I'm not going to share with you. I don't want to, spill the beans quite yet. But I agree. It's getting out of that comfort zone. And as you and I know, Tony Robbins says, life begins out of your comfort zone. And that's true with everything. And so, again, I really want to appreciate your journey and your inspiration for others, because as a medical professional myself, been in the business for over 35 years, I've seen how many people have just simply settled for a lot less. And I like this term, settle for more, do so much more, get that 20x factor, whatever it is, have fun with it, be yourself. And, the more that you get to work on yourself, the more that you get to give to others as well. And that's perhaps the best reward that we can ever have, is as we give to others and see their wins as well. And again, our biggest champion, again, I have to say this again, is Mark from User. He's championed us and has inspired us. And he was a great inspiration for many of you going to Kokoro. So with that in mind, Gary, just how do people find you, and any last words of wisdom?
One place they can find me is I've got a website, coachgman.com. They can find me on Facebook under Coach G-Man as well. I'm just recently moved from Colorado to Greensboro, North Carolina. So those would be two great places if they want to track me down.
Great. And so what I invite you to do is write a comment or just put that information in the comment box with this video, with this interview. And once again, Gary, I really want to thank you for today. Again, your inspiration. I look forward to connecting with you in New Zealand and learning from you and supporting you in whatever way that I can. And so I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation, real people, real conversations, real success, talking to Gary Allen Rush, business coach and neurostrategist. Gary, thank you.
Thank you.